What is up, Republic of Gamers, and welcome to ROG Sidequest, our weekly gaming podcast where we dive into any topic in the gaming world. My name is Jake Klinsky, and this week we've got two special guests, Mr. Ryan Arano Ward and Eric Proteus Bourne. Ryan, welcome to the show.
Thank you, thank you.
Eric, welcome. What's new? How has Resident Evil, our topic for today, been treating you guys?
Oh, it's been an absolute blast.
Yeah, and there was actually more Resident Evil news today, so it's great. I mean, it was in Dead by Daylight, but it was still great.
Yeah.
Another great game.
We'll talk about that. There's, a lot of stuff going on with Resident Evil. We've seen the remake for Resident Evil 2 drop just last year? Was that last year?
that was a long time ago because 3 came out. It's 2 years now?
2 years now. Okay.
Yeah, 2 years.
It's been a minute then, but still, it feels like we're getting a lot of good content for Resident Evil, and Resident Evil 8 dropped probably 2 weeks ago, I think, and we're gonna kind of just be chatting and discussing our thoughts on it. And guys in chat, feel free to let us know what you guys think of Resident Evil 8 and where it stands up in the mix. But just kind of to preface the conversation, Eric, how many Resident Evil games have you played? Are there any that you haven't played, and which is your favorite?
Oh, that's a good question. So my all-time favorite is definitely Resident Evil 4, and that's really where I started with the series. You know, I was a broke, just out of college young man when that came out, and living in a house with 5 guys, and we passed the controller back and forth through that game.
Which console
that was
did
a
you play on?
defining for you. The best console, GameCube.
Nice. Fun fact, that was also my first Resident Evil game because I never played the isometric top-down, or fixed camera games. I never played those. I played 4 on the Wii in my living room at my parents' house on like a 56-inch TV, and I almost broke it multiple times because I played the whole game standing, right? So it was a very memorable gaming experience. I'll say that. I remember liking the game a lot. I also remember saying, "What are you buying?" all the time to my friends.
Stranger.
Have you gotten, sorry to kind of jump ahead, but have you gotten the reference to 4 from the Duke?
I just kind of assumed he was like the same guy or part of the same.
At one point, he literally goes, "What are you buying?"
Okay.
It's just something an old friend used to say.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's great. I have not heard that yet, but that is, so he's not the same character, but he's
No.
definitely from like the same,
Market,
yeah.
merchant,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
guild.
Yeah, and Lady Dimitrescu kind of stole the show in the pre-release hype, but I think the Duke is arguably the best character in that game.
I would argue that too.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
Ryan,
He just continues to do things, I guess is the best way to put it, but he's just a great voice acting and just great character all around.
it's a lot of fun. Ryan, I got to ask you the same question. Like, where do you land? What is your favorite Resident Evil game, and which ones have you played or not played?
I can confidently say I've played every Resident Evil ever.
I knew it.
From
You
Dead Aim to Game Boy Resident Evil to, crappy ones that have come out recently that shall not be named. But I started with Resident Evil 1. I remember I was at a friend's birthday party and he introduced me to Resident Evil 1 right in the first scene where the zombie, it was like the cinematic where the zombie turns around, and I remember being scared out of my mind in 4th grade. And then the moment I got a PlayStation, that and Final Fantasy VII were the first 2 games I got, and have now become obviously staples in my life. As Jake knows, I'm a huge Final Fantasy nerd too.
Yeah.
But I would say probably my favorite game is probably Resident Evil 2. And you can go between the 2, the remake and the original. And I will say Resident Evil Village, I need to play it again, but I'm pretty sure it is up there as at least top 3 of my favorite RE games.
It's funny because
Yeah, I think the question you have to ask is it the greatest or a great Resident Evil game? And it's one of the two.
I was gonna say when I finished it, I didn't want to say it was my favorite because it just seems such a rash decision, especially with games like RE4 and, in my opinion, RE2. And I guess a lot of people feel the same way about RE3. But when I finished that game, I was so happy with how it happened. especially with some of the mistakes they made in RE7. They fixed all that. They brought in the Resident Evil 4 elements, and it's just they brought in action elements, and then they kept the horror. They just did everything
So,
almost perfect in my eyes.
as someone who's only played like Resident Evil 2, 4, 7, and now 8, where I mean, is this a normal thing for the story to kind of extend from 7 to 8, or is this a first time deal?
Yes and no. I think it's never had like a direct sequel like this has been, but you have characters. 5 has Chris Redfield, who you know in 8.
Yeah.
But he was from Resident Evil 1, and 3 had Joe Valentine, which was kind of a direct sequel to 1 because that's right after. You have
Okay.
Veronica, which is Claire from 2. So you have things like that, but nothing from 7 to 8.
Where they're talking about the events that just
Yes.
happened. And if you guys haven't played 7, I will say it's probably the scariest game I've ever played. I actually had to stop at one point and just take a break because I was just really I don't bothered by it. Like, just something about that setting. But here in the setting of Resident Evil 8, the horror feels so much more distant than, like, thinking about like the United States in the South with these hillbillies in the woods. That's just, I'm already scared. That's enough for me to be worried, right? But then you make them like demons and zombies or whatever, then yeah, great, horrifying. But we're not looking at this snowy setting, like in this village in the middle of, I perceive it as Europe. I don't know where we are, but I don't know, something about that setting has like an element of like, it just feels magical to me in a way, and doesn't seem as scary just as a overarching thing. I don't know if I'm alone and just being like, oh look, a werewolf. I'm just not as afraid of them.
Well, I'm going to argue it's really about the gameplay, right? Because going back to Resident Evil 7, the game director recently came out and admitted that like 7 kind of pushed into the horror a little hard. A lot of people didn't finish it, and they wanted to adjust the pacing a bit to make sure that folks like experienced the whole game in 8. And the thing about 7 that is just so intense is not so much the setting as how helpless that game makes you feel. Like how much of that game you go through with like no agency, you're hiding, you're desperately getting away from that horrible family. And 8 doesn't do that quite as much.
Well, you're fighting, it feels like you're fighting more enemies in general in 8, so which gives you a sense
Yeah.
of power when you're slaying more often. It's like, I can do this. But when you're just helplessly running exclusively, then it feels...
Well, they address that.
Spooky.
They talk about Ethan in 7 being just a guy, and then by the time 8 comes around, he's talking to Mia, and he's saying how they've gone through training. That he is now a trained op to a certain extent, and it's all happened so fast. But you aren't just a guy who showed up on a doorstep, to meet the Baker family.
Speaking of him just being a guy, without giving any spoilers that might exist later in the game, I had my hand cut off, and then I just kind of poured some solution on it and stuck it back on.
That's the way hands work.
Oh.
What's your problem?
Good. I see. I just wasn't sure if this was something I was missing about in life, or if Capcom physics is Capcom physics, or what.
Well, they do explain it in 7, and they actually will explain it to you by the end of this game. But
Okay.
it is lore in theory, but it's also just ridiculous.
It's the right kind of ridiculous. I love how much that game brutalizes his hands over and over and over.
Well, and because the thing is you have to relate to Ethan, and being first person, how else are you going to relate to him? But you have to see if they pierce his stomach, you're not going to see it. So what are they going to show? They're going to pierce his hands. They're going to cut him off. They're going to have a werewolf bite off 2 of your fingers in the first 10 minutes.
I know. It was just like, oh, okay, yeah, this is good. You get hooked into your shoulders, and then you rip through that. Or was that your hands again?
They were your hands.
It was your hands again. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. They really don't like his hands. Okay. So we can kind of just progress into favorite moments in the game so far. And obviously, I'm not as far as you guys are. I'm still in the castle. I've slain the daughters. I've mounted the angel heads on the statues. and I assume I'm about to fight the first boss. Does it sound right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Seems like the natural progression of the game. You know, from where I'm at in the game, I'm horrible at puzzles. I'm just like the worst at paying attention to a map. I will just run into a room and then run around aimlessly without actually verifying that I've already completed that room, which the map tells you. I've now gotten past my stubbornness to play the game properly where I'm actually looking at the map. But I'm enjoying the puzzles a lot. I'm really enjoying the atmosphere of this game. The enemies do seem you know, they're not like overwhelmingly difficult or anything. Like there's mechanics where you can understand when they're going to attack and how to kill them efficiently without a gun and stuff. So personally, I like games that give you that kind of option. It's like if you just want to use a knife to kill this guy, you can, and you can do that without taking damage as long as you're doing it correctly and being patient. And that's really good. So game design, I got to give them an A+ for just like the setting and everything. Graphically, how far have you guys tried pushing this game? Brian, are you playing on console or PC?
PS5.
You playing on console? Heathen. That's okay. That's okay.
Like, you know, but one thing me and my girlfriend share is we share a love for horror, and she can't play the games, but she'll watch me play them.
Oh, that's
so
cool then. I've done that. With the wife.
Yeah,
as
so
well,
like we literally took off that Saturday. I actually have a good friend who we have played every Resident Evil together since RE5. And we always play the day of that it comes out. So he came over, we had food and stuff like that, and we just sat in my basement and played all the way through.
Dude, the nerd dream right there. Eric, how about you? Have you tried pushing the game at all? What platform are you playing on? What I know you're playing on PC, but what system are you using?
Oh, come on, buddy. You know who you're talking to. I've played this on a couple of different laptops. I've pushed it. I've benched it.
Oh, wow. Okay. You're going ham.
Let me give one compliment to this game. It's really well optimized. It runs really smoothly. But there are some nice options that really improve the graphical clarity. The Castle Dimitrescu looks amazing with ray tracing. I've on the ROG Zephyrus Duo equipped with the mobile RTX 3070. I was able to do max settings, all ray tracing at 1080p, and still enjoyed FPS over 60.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Pretty
have you
soon I'm
tried
gonna play it with the 3080, and I'm gonna be trying that actually this week. I have a mobile 3080 on hand as of a couple days ago.
Oh, it arrived. Nice.
We're gonna see what it can do at WQHD.
I just sent Eric the Flow X13 and the XG Mobile that I had. It's now in his hands.
Nice.
Yeah, we pass out around a lot of devices. I actually streamed on the Scar 15 last week, and I was able to game and stream in 1080p, averaging around, I'd say, 90 to 100 FPS. On a, you know, with that adaptive sync, it's just felt really good and really enjoyable performance overall, because I just went into the settings and did like the, you know, the auto preset. It like chooses, it shows you roughly what to expect. And again, I'm encoding with my GPU as well, so my streaming is utilizing the GPU. So it's gonna take a lot of burden there. This game is very graphics heavy and very low on the CPU usage, I've noticed, though, because I was playing on my desktop this morning, and it's a 2080 Ti, which I'm using 100% of, right? But I'm gaming in 4K, getting around 90 FPS, so it's doing great. But then the CPU is at like 30% usage, and that's a Ryzen 5900. But yeah, it's just a very GPU intensive game, but feels really good. Yeah. Really nice looking game.
It uses a lot of GPU memory as well. Like if you want to get the best settings in the game, you need to have a pretty good pool of that.
Huh, maybe I should boost the clock on my memory and just see how that changes the performance.
Yeah, there you go.
Worth experimenting with. So, favorite moments in the game. Ryan, there's this part that you keep saying, I can't wait to talk to you about. I haven't gotten there, but I know Eric has. So, let loose. Talk about it.
It's the next house that you go to, House Beneviento.
Just say House B. House B. How's that?
And it's basically, they saw everyone how excited they got for Silent Hill PT, and they created it into their own house, and it is just a brilliant moment of Resident Evil in gaming, and it is by far my favorite Resident Evil part of all time.
So let's just kind of take a step back. Silent Hill PT is that game that Kojima was making, or was Kojima making it? Right, and
Yep.
it was like a
It's
little.
the sound he was making before he got canned.
It was like a demo that they released and had a lot of
demo on the PS3. There have been many of spiritual successors that have been made. Visage is one of them that comes to mind, and they're just it's a very popular genre, I guess, nowadays. But it's Resident Evil made their own take on it, and it's wonderful.
Yeah, that house really slowed me down on this game. I loaded it up day one, having a blast, run through the castle, and then I hit House Beneviento, man. I played for 15 minutes and had to set it down for 2 days. That is cruel.
Really?
Yeah, it's dolls and
Oh no.
babies and just very psychological. You're walking through, they take away your weapons, and it's all puzzles, and good luck.
Yeah.
It sounds like
I'll spoil you one little detail with it, right? Like, you get to this house and it's mostly empty. You explore it, there's a jump scare, and then you have to deal with this mannequin laid out on a table, and you have to find clues in it.
Oh god.
You're taking it apart, you're looking inside things, you're opening its mouth, and the worst part is you have to like go to its eyeball and kind of roll the eyeball sideways to see some little text on it, and the image of that stuck with me like for a week. Oh my goodness.
It's also your wife. It's like a mannequin of your wife, Mia.
Wow.
Yeah.
So
So
what is it that you love about it so much, Ryan?
The atmosphere, just how
Just
they
the whole
delivered it.
package. The whole package.
The whole package. Like I said, I was so excited for the playable test, the Silent Hill, the PT, and when that was taken away, I was just amazed that no one really tried to do it. And then now here we are. We have this little bit of piece of it, and it's just so well done, and they just tweak it perfectly that it just makes me want them to make that game now. I've wanted a Silent Hill forever. You know that, and I want them to make PT as Resident Evil.
As we were setting up, Eric, you mentioned that Silent Hill was your favorite series growing up as well in the horror genre or all genres.
Oh, that's a big question.
We'll stick with horror.
Yeah, back in the day when it was kind of, if you like survival horror, you were either in the Silent Hill camp or the Resident Evil camp. And in retrospect, I think I put my money on the wrong horse, because we've had some great Resident Evil games in recent years, and a whole lot of nothing on Silent Hill. But Silent Hills 2 stands up.
If
That game is still an excellent one to go back to.
If I'm not mistaken, Sony was interested in purchasing some IPs off Konami, and Silent Hill was one of the IPs.
Yeah,
that was
they were
discussed.
trying.
So, I think there's probably hope. I don't know if Konami will just sit there and let it rot. So,
will they though?
I don't know. I don't know what Konami's deal is nowadays. My namesake is Solid Snake, obviously, in my handle. So, I'm hopeful to see some release of those IPs. But anyways, all right, let's talk about the boss fights in this game. Overall, like, how do you feel the bosses went, Ryan? I know you've played through the whole game, and do they feel like there's good variety?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Every house is completely different, and every house,
in terms of like the mechanics for the house and everything,
and every house hits a different like style of horror.
Nice.
So like you have Lady D, who you'll get to in a little bit, and she turns into
something,
typical Resident Evil. Then you have House B, which you have your PT feel. Then you have the next boss, who's like this giant grotesque style creature, and then the final boss is kind of like it ends up being a lot more action horror than you have previously.
So that's your Resident Evil movie.
Yeah, so it really hits all the different series, and really pulls together a great. You don't feel stale at any point.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I'm enjoying the different vibes that that they're delivering, even just with Lady D chasing you around the castle. That's very Resident Evil 2. Where I mean, I know it's not the only other time they've done it. The stomping character following you. What's his name? I just call him
Mr.
Stompy.
X.
Okay, not Big
The
Chungus.
tyrant.
Yeah, but it's a really fun bit of gameplay where it's like I need to stop to explore this room, but nope, I can't. The music's playing, time to move, and it feels really good. But it basically it sounds like this is the only house where that's a mechanic, or is that not true?
Yeah, that's the only house that's
Yeah,
a
okay,
mechanic.
so it's nice. It's nice to be like done with that. Like okay, now I'm moving on to a different vibe, a different theme. Cool.
Yeah, I kind of think of it like, sometimes you read a Stephen King book and it's one big, huge, long, drawn out story. And other times it's a collection of short novellas, each kind of with their own take. And Village is more like that, like a collection of different stories that all have this unifying theme and direction.
Except it's one continuous story of one person's struggle to break out. So they've managed to paint a bunch of different pictures with one setting, which is cool.
One man and his poor abused hands.
What? Yeah, definitely. It's funny though. I'm just kind of thinking about escaping the castle because again, that's the point I'm at, and I'm really excited to get back out into the village and to explore it.
Mhm.
From the first like big fight in the village where you're being chased by tons of werewolves and stuff, does that give you just a small taste of how big the village is, or is it actually quite a lot bigger than that?
Yes and no. It has a couple of different sections. It winds around itself in pretty confusing ways.
Yeah.
And you go back and through several times as the game progresses, and there's interesting differences each time. But, you
Well, that's
asked about
cool.
our favorite moments of the game, and honestly, the village is my favorite part. Um, Resident Evil 4 was on my list of games I play every year for so long because of that iconic, fantastic early fight in the village. And I've been begging for like a true sequel to that moment, and they delivered. Boy, did they deliver.
Did you expect him to ask where they were going after when everyone was leaving? Like in RE4, were you expecting like almost like a line for line type of "Where's everyone going? Bingo," or something along those lines? I was kind of sad when nothing happened.
At other points in the game, Ethan has these amazing Resident
Yeah.
Evil lines. I love it when he like melodramatically like, "Why is everyone dying on me?" And Ethan, come on. You're in a horrible village run by like monsters. Of course everyone's dying.
The writing is amusing but not bad. It definitely has its moments where it's like, okay, that
It's
was a line.
cheesy.
But
It's campy, but it's
Yeah.
awesome.
it doesn't
Yeah, no,
stand out
there's-
to me as like something that detracts from it, whereas I could say otherwise about other Final Fantasy VII remastered games.
Do you want me to end this call right now? I will leave this call.
Oh,
I love that game.
Yeah,
I didn't feel the same way as you, but that's a different topic for another day.
that's a different show. Yeah, no, it seems good in that regard. Man, so do you just talking about Resident Evil 4 because you brought that up? I think they announced they're making a VR remake, but I don't know if we're actually getting a proper remake.
I can't imagine us not getting a proper remake because to me that's the whole reason Village was made. Like they made the assets, so why are they not going to use it for what I know a lot of people are. I know it's a very controversial topic because a lot of people don't think that game needs to be remade. I'm in the boat that it does because I've tried to go back and play it and I struggle. And like I've gone back with my girlfriend who we play horror games and she says she can't watch it because she thinks it looks terrible. So I'm on the camp that it needs to be remade, but I know a lot of people aren't, and I just don't see how you cannot do that when you made the assets.
I haven't played it since I played it on the Wii in like 2007, which it's been a few years. I can't claim my memory of that game is very good. I remember enjoying it, and but a replay, I'm not going to do that unless it's remastered. VR, I'd consider it, but even still, VR with like bad graphics makes me feel bad, makes me feel dizzy. So I don't
I'm
know.
very curious because I think of like the Umbrella Chronicles, which was also a Wii game, where they took updated versions, but they made it like a rail shooter, so it wasn't technically the same thing. But I could see them doing something like that for VR.
It's an
because,
arcade shooter, like
yeah, it was like
like
a Time
Unreal.
Crisis like rail shooter.
That sounds pretty
But they
fun, actually.
but they did all of the games, so they went through all the different games, and they had to update the graphics for the
Huh.
Wii. But I could see them doing like I can't imagine them just plopping you into an old, unremastered VR. I just can't see that happening.
No, you can't do those old school low res textures in VR. Yeah, that doesn't work. You need high res textures for VR to be compelling at all. And Resident Evil 4, yeah, if we're gonna pick on it, its textures are 2005.
That's not a bad thing, right? Because you said it was the GameCube, which was a wonderful system that it put out, and it was that's where you got the Resident Evil 1 remake too. So they were able to put out these wonderful graphics with it, but that was 16 years ago, and I just think it's time.
So I have to go off on a tangent. We were talking about these rail shooter remakes that they made for the Wii a million years ago. Anybody that's been to the arcade in the 90s has probably seen The House of the Dead. Remember that game?
Oh yeah.
I think they're remaking it. By the way,
I'd be all about that. But it was a classic, like on rails, Time Crisis type shooter, but it's zombies, right? So, did you guys know that there is a different version of that game to teach kids how to type called Typing of the Dead?
Absolutely.
I
had
every
it on
minute of
Dreamcast.
it. I played every minute and I love it.
Typing of the Dead?
Yeah.
You guys are cooler gamers
Listen.
than me. Okay.
If you want me to come back and we'll do a show about typing games, I'm in.
Okay.
Mavis Beacon.
Mavis Beacon. My favorite is the Textor Assist about killing demons by correctly typing things. It's the world's first bullet hell typing game. It's fantastic.
That's I need to look that up. That sounds awesome.
Wow. I'm glad I went off on that tangent. I just gained so much knowledge.
Yeah, I remember having House of the Dead and Typing of the Dead on the Dreamcast, and I
Did
played
you have a
those games.
keyboard on the? Yeah, you had one of the keyboards. I had a keyboard because I played Phantasy Star Online, but I didn't
Same.
think. Okay, yeah, the average user I don't think had keyboards for the Dreamcast. I don't even.
Why?
Yeah,
The Dreamcast had everything though.
Yeah.
it did. It was a very unique console. First console I ever owned with a modem in it. 56K.
Yeah, I was about to say, because even like the PlayStation 2, I think you had to buy.
It was separate.
It was separate, yeah.
It was a adapter you had to plug into the bottom of it. Yeah. Well, Eric, how many bosses have you slain? 2?
I've slain 3.
You've slain 3 bosses already. Okay.
I
So
have, yeah.
how many bosses are there total, Ryan?
Well, there's 4 houses,
Okay. Okay.
and then there's like it's really hard to describe what a boss is, because like people consider those sisters to be bosses, but they kind of are, but they're not like major bosses, I guess. So
I find them to be surprisingly easy.
that's why I would consider them a mini boss, because they're not bullet sponges or anything along those lines.
No. Well, the one where you open the hole in the ceiling, she didn't attack me once.
Same.
She died. She just died. Like, it's like, okay, that was fun. Guess I'll loot this room now. But I'm fine with that. They are scary in their own right when they're like following you around. You got to find the location in which you can fight them. That you're not always in the right place at the right time. Well, I think the first one you are. You kind of stumble immediately into the room. There's like a cinematic that opens the wall and teaches you how to do it. Because I think otherwise,
the window breaks.
they teach you that the weakness is, I guess, fresh air.
Fresh air.
Yeah, we can get into that another time, but there's reasons for it.
Maybe they have allergies. You're letting in all the pollen.
There's a lot of pollen up in that snowy village, huh?
I will say though, I was very, very confused, because I was like, "Oh, cold air! I'm outside. I'll be safe from Lady D."
No,
and then
I did
she
the same
does not
thing.
care.
I ran into the courtyard and she's just like, "I'm gonna kill you." I'm like, "Okay."
It has to do with how they are made versus
Yeah,
how Lady D was made.
that's something that I know you have extensive knowledge of. Is like the various, what do we call these viruses? T virus, and so there's how many variations are there total in this universe? If you had to take a guess.
At least one for each game.
Okay.
And
Each game is
that includes the spin-offs, that includes
they're all
all
different
the
viruses for real?
more or
Yeah.
less. A lot of them are different strains and stuff like that. Like I know I think
Just-
it was like Dead Aim takes place on a ship, and that's like a different strain of the G virus, and so on and so on. It's and like each tyrant is a different strain of virus that was injected into them, and it's not even worth trying to understand. But with that being said, this virus is very special,
They
and you'll
all
find out
are.
eventually.
Okay. Cool.
Now let me say this about the bosses in Village. I feel like the fights are a little more cinematic than I've seen in previous iterations. You know, it's about the setting, it's about the way they frame the bosses coming out and finding you. It's a bit more of a cinematic experience than you know, like some bosses in past Resident Evils have been a bit more technical. You had to kind of figure out the weak spots, use the right weapons, and make sure you're dodging, you know, the right abilities. These ones are a bit more of a thrill ride, bit more of a roller coaster.
The only one who I didn't feel that way with is the third boss, but it wasn't a bad thing. But I think that's just what they were going for with him is, you know, you had to. But even then, it's still the same idea. You still had to. Still was a, you know, explosive barrels placed around the area that you had to use, and he did have a weak spot. And same with Lady D. Like Lady D has a weak spot, but even then, I know you don't have to hit that spot to be able to kill them.
Mm-hmm. And they telegraph those weak spots pretty.
Oh,
clearly.
absolutely.
Like, you're not. Yeah, it's not a big mystery.
I will say that overall, it does seem like this is a game where the developers put the world and the story first, and then like the combat and stuff second. Not to say that the combat or anything is bad. It just seems like overall their intent was to give you a story, to give you an experience, and not to give you, like, you know, some hyper zombie shooter, which is fairly true for most Resident Evil games. But I think a lot of people were skeptical going into 7 with it being first person, and I think they did a really good job with 7, and I think the first person element worked at increasing the level of horror and the experience. But to me in 8, it just feels right. Like I just can't imagine the game any other way. Like that first person experience, there's something, you know, that's very immersive in this game.
100%. I mean, I do like 7, but I always had my issues with it. You know, I didn't like the boat section. I didn't like how everything was molded. There was no variety in enemies. Like, I had my issues with it, other than obviously you had the bakers and stuff like that. And I also, one of my biggest gripes with Resident Evil 7, I always bring this up, is I hate games that don't finish the story within the game. So
that
Resident Evil 7, you had the brother who gets away, and you don't see him until you do the Chris DLC, and like that annoys me beyond belief.
I think I played that. No,
maybe,
I think I started.
It's like a first-person like running gun.
Yeah, it's like a different game.
Yeah,
I do remember. Maybe they give you a demo with it or something. I just remember, like, at least the start of that. But yeah, that shouldn't be allowed. If you're selling DLC to get the full story, it's like, come on, guys, like, get out of here. Give us side missions for DLC. That's fine.
Yeah, so that's like, so I have my issues with 7, but I really do think that 7 was scarier per se than 8, but 8 is just a much better game in every aspect.
Eric, do you agree so far?
Yeah. Yeah, sorry to be brief, but I think that's the fair assessment. You know, I look at 7 as kind of this really cool experiment where an established company with a long-running IP really took a lot of risks
Yeah.
to try out some new ideas. And it's really clear that they learned a lot in the process. Like, we have 8 and it's as good as it is because they tried some things in 7. They found that first person worked. They found that how to really dial up the horror in those early sections. But you also see they learned that, man, we need more action. You know?
Yeah.
I'm gonna need you need to give me some artillery. Give me a suitcase full of big guns.
But then the other thing is what they learned was, and what they started to strive away from, and what they learned in 4, and then 5 and 6 happened. But you can have action, but still have horror. You don't need to lose one to gain the other, and that's what I think they really did well with this, is because you'll be fighting a load of werewolves, and then all of a sudden one's grabbing you from behind and you jump, whereas in other games it's just so run and gun that you don't even get that horror element.
You still don't feel like a super soldier, right? And I think that's one of the important things. Like, your character is fairly slow, he's fairly clunky, you can't jump high or anything like that, and that
you can't
really
punch a boulder.
Yeah, it makes you feel very vulnerable in that sense. And but you still don't feel helpless, because once you have that shotgun, once you have that sniper rifle, like, those guns pack a punch. And I just started getting some upgrades for my guns, and it feels significant. I do feel progression in my character, which is, to me, really important in games, because I do like having some kind of sense that I'm getting stronger, even if the enemies are getting stronger. But because your gear is, of course, expanding. You just told me that I'm gonna lose all my guns going into the next house, so I'm gonna hate everything probably, but that's okay.
Yep. If we can pass a little advice on to folks starting this game, don't want to spoil things, man, but don't be shy about upgrading your guns, and don't sell your fish. Your chickens, your meat, those have a use, and don't just sell them for cash the moment you get them. Hang on to them, trust us, it'll pay off.
I don't think I sold any of my food, so that's good.
Yeah, it is. I did a quick little research. So it looks like there's 7 main viruses, but then within those viruses, there's a bunch of different break-offs from there. So it's about, I was counting, and I was over 15, and I was like, okay, I'm done.
I'm curious if anyone in chat has any weird Resident Evil preferences, like favorite games that might not be, because I commonly hear 2, 4, and now people are saying 8 as being the best Resident Evil games.
I've met people who think 5 is the best one because of co-op. They loved it. I also know that 3 is a very popular one. I personally am not a fan of Nemesis, but I know 3 is a very popular one because that's one of the few games that has choices you can make that affect the story.
That is
things
cool.
like that. And they brought that back for the Resident Evil 1 remake. I also know that the remake is a lot of I don't want to say true Resident Evil fans, but a lot of core Resident Evil fans, because it's the perfect remake. Plus, you have the pre-rendered backgrounds with the fixed camera angle, things like that makes the remake really popular. But other than that, you're not going to find people saying Dead Aim or Chronicles or whatever other one you want to bring up.
I got a. Go ahead.
Someone's gonna bring up that classic scene in Resident Evil 1, the zombie dogs. Everyone talks about the zombie dogs.
Yeah, coming through the window.
Oh yeah.
Like, you have Resident Evil 0. Like, I've met people who that's their favorite game. I don't get it, but just same people who say Final Fantasy 1 is their favorite game. I don't get it.
Well, you just beat that game, right?
Yeah. Oh, that game is terrible. Like, bad. But it was 1986, so maybe that was they first played.
Yeah.
So there's so many more factors other than it being a good game.
Well, yeah. I mean, story is one part, and those games don't necessarily always age that well. Obviously, Resident Evil was kind of the first of its kind too. I mean, what came first, Resident Evil or Silent Hill?
I believe Resident Evil. I think that was 96. I feel like first Silent Hill was 98. I wouldn't quote me on that though.
Yeah.
PS1?
I think you're in the ballpark there.
Yeah, they're both PS1.
Yeah.
We have the ability to find out. Silent Hill was 99, and I know Resident Evil was 96 or so, because the game takes place in 98, and I remember it being a big deal in like 6th grade, because he had being like, oh, this is the year that
Good
Resident
luck.
Evil happens.
Yeah. Well, cool. I'm personally
As
really
long as
excited.
you avoid Raccoon City.
Right?
I gotta play
Still
that.
don't know where it is.
I think so. You were saying they remade 3. I need to pick that up. I don't own that. I played the 2 remake.
Yeah.
I got to pick up 3 after I finish 8, because if they're gonna remake it, I feel like I should play it. These games have definitely earned my respect in the last few years of playing them, because I don't think I had only played 4, and then I just played 7 last year. I played 2 the year before that or something, and that's it. So I'm kind of a Resident Evil noob, but I've been enjoying these games a lot.
Yeah.
So the remake of 3 is worth looking at. Like it's
was a
not
DLC.
quite as good as the remake of 2.
Okay.
Yeah, like Resident Evil 2 has that iconic police station. It's such a good layout and environment. It's just a fascinating game world. And 3 doesn't have something quite as good.
Okay.
But it is definitely a fun rampage. It's a blast.
The thing about 2 for me is, you were just talking about the police station. That map is so incredibly memorable to me. Like, I could just I could go there right now and just walk around and know exactly where to go after only having played the game once. And I can't say that's true for so many games for me, but also the setting just seems perfect for a zombie movie. Although, it's a zombie game. Although maybe they're not zombies. I don't know. They're zombies. They're zombies.
In 2?
Yeah.
I'm willing to use the term
there's
loosely.
zombies.
Yeah. Well, what are the weird, like, robed guys in 8? Are they zombies? Are they ghouls? What are they?
They're zombies.
Okay. Eric, what do you say? Are they zombies? The robed guys with swords and scythes and axes?
They come out of the ground.
They do come out of the ground.
They disintegrate.
I don't know what to call them. I just know that I kill them.
That's fair.
Disintegrating is the virus strain more than whether they're a zombie or not.
Okay. Okay. Well, I think we succeeded in doing a nice show without providing too many spoilers. Ryan, I'm gonna make you make a final call right now. Does after critically thinking about it some more, land a top spot, or can you not commit to that yet? Is it number 1, or is it top 3? How far are you willing to commit?
I'm definitely willing to commit top 2.
Top 2. So what's tied with?
And it's part of nostalgia. Resident Evil 2 is everything to me. Like, that game is, I used to speedrun that as a kid without even knowing what speedrunning was, and it was a game I played for like years, and then when the rumor came out about the remake, I was so excited, and I play the remake 3 to 4 times a year and just kind of run through it, knife only, like that sort of thing. And it just has so much meaning to me, where that's where, Resident Evil Village, I've been watching nonstop as I work and stuff like that, but I've only had a chance to really play it once fully through. So I need to really dive in and play the harder modes, the difficulties, and unlock some stuff and really understand it better before I'd be able to make that decision. But I was so happy with it when I played it, and will continue to play it.
Love to hear it. I mean, I'm enjoying the game a lot myself. Guys, be sure to check out Resident Evil Village if you haven't already. We do plan to stream it again in the future on our ROG Twitch page, as I do weekly streams. So we'll let you guys know. We're not going to be doing it this Friday. I think we're aiming to stream it again next week, because I started the game last Friday outdoors. I just decided I wanted to try to game and stream on Wi-Fi, and it worked flawlessly with our ROG Rapture AX11000. Got to get that plug in there, because I'm super impressed. 3 hours of streaming, 0 drop frames. Streaming is not something I believed in doing on Wi-Fi, and it was just fun to kind of go out to the fire pit. I scratched my hand, right, the same hand that Ethan gets bit off in half. It was all cut up from cutting branches and stuff. It was perfect. I was like, wow. I was in a burning house while there was a fire behind me, and it decided to smoke me out in that exact moment. So it was a pretty fun time. But you know, Ryan, Eric, thank you guys for joining me to just kind of chat about Resident Evil. Maybe
Thank you.
we'll play Resident Evil 4 VR at some point and talk about that.
I leave the horror VR to other people.
But the sad, I remember when Resident Evil 7 was in VR, and I was absolutely not. No, thank you.
Nope.
Well, guys, thank you all for tuning in. We'll see you next time. GG's.
Yeah.